to vintage horror, where the darkness comes alive. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? What time is it in your world right now? And most importantly, how does this tale make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and brace yourself for a chilling journey into the unknown. 4 horror stories, 4 reasons to stay awake tonight. If you dare to listen till the end, you might just survive the nightmares. Story 1. The Unseen Watcher. The first call came at 11:42 p.m. I just glanced at the clock, its red digits glowing accusingly in the dim light of my cramped apartment. I was sprawled on the couch, half buried in a nest of blankets, debating whether to surrender to sleep or indulge in one more episode of the crime drama I'd been binging. The popcorn bowl teetered on my lap, kernels scattered across my faded Star Wars pajama pants. The shrill ring of my phone sliced through the quiet, startling me so badly that the bowl tipped, spilling its contents onto the floor. The screen flashed unknown number. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Telemarketers at this hour. But curiosity, that stubborn itch, nudged me to answer. Hello? My voice sounded thin, almost lost in the stillness. Silence greeted me, heavy and oppressive, stretching on for seconds that felt like minutes. Then a low, raspy breath hissed through the line, deliberate and unnervingly close, as if someone were pressing their mouth to the receiver. Hello? I said again, irritation creeping in. Who is this? The call cut off with a sharp, hollow click. I stared at the phone, its screen dimming back to black, and shrugged. A wrong number, probably. Or some kid with too much time on their hands. I brushed the popcorn off my lap, retrieved the bowl, and sank back into the couch, determined to let the episode's familiar tension drown out the lingering unease. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same unknown number. My pulse quickened, though I told myself it was nothing. This time, I let it go to voicemail, watching the screen until it stopped vibrating. A minute later, a notification blinked. One new message. My finger hesitated over the play button, a flicker of dread curling in my stomach like a cold fist. I pressed it anyway, holding the phone to my ear. That same raspy breathing filled the line, slow and rhythmic, each exhale a calculated invasion of my peace. Then, a whisper, so faint I had to replay it twice, to be sure. I can see you. The words slithered into my skull, leaving a chill that prickled down my spine. I deleted the message with shaking fingers, blocked the number, and muttered, just a creep, as if saying it aloud could make it true. But the apartment felt different now, too quiet, too exposed. I stood, abandoning the couch for the kitchen, needing the mundane comfort of tea to steady my nerves. As the kettle hummed, I edged toward the window above the sink, peering through the blinds. The street below was a tableau of shadows. Parked cars gleaming faintly under a flickering street lamp, empty sidewalks stretching into the dark. A stray cat darting between trash bins. Nothing unusual. Still, my reflection in the glass looked pale, eyes wide and hunted. I yanked the blind shut and returned to the couch, clutching my chamomile mug like a lifeline. The TV flickered on, but the show couldn't hold me. Those whispered words looped endlessly. I can see you. My phone buzzed again, jolting me upright. Another text from a different unknown number. Nice pajamas. I froze, staring down at my worn Star Wars pants, the ones I'd owned since college. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. How could they know? I leapt up, racing to every window, yanking curtains closed with such force one rod rattled loose. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, each beat screaming, "They're watching! They're watching!" I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, fingers trembling so badly I misdialed twice. "I'm getting threatening calls and texts," I blurted when the dispatcher answered. "Someone says they can see me. I think I'm being watched." "Are you in immediate danger?" Her voice was calm, infuriatingly so. "Do you see anyone around your property?" "No, I don't know," I stammered, peering through a slit in the living room curtains. The street remained empty, mocking my panic. "They know what I'm wearing." "Ma'am, unless there's an immediate threat, we can't send officers. Lock your doors and windows and call back if you see anything suspicious." The line went dead, leaving me stranded in my own fear. I checked the locks, front door, back door, every window, twice, then 3 times, the deadbolts clicking with hollow reassurance. They weren't going to help me. The phone rang again, yet another unknown number. My better judgment screamed to ignore it, but my hand moved on its own, answering before I could stop it. "Stop calling me," I snapped, forcing bravado into my voice. A low chuckle slithered through the speaker, deep and guttural, raising the hairs on my neck. "But we're just getting started, Sarah." My blood turned to ice. They knew my name. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice cracking. "What do you want?" "Look out your window, Sarah. I have a surprise for you." The line went dead. Every instinct shrieked, "Don't do it." But my feet carried me to the living room window, hand trembling as I gripped the curtain. I pulled it back an inch, just enough to peek. At first, nothing, just the same empty street, the same flickering lamp. Then movement, a figure across the road, half hidden by the gnarled trunk of an oak tree, staring up at my window. The shadows cloaked them, but I felt their gaze, a weight pressing against my chest. I dropped the curtain and stumbled back, breath hitching. A coincidence, I told myself. A random person, not connected. My phone buzzed. "I told you I could see you." Panic seized me, a wild animal clawing at my insides. I bolted to my bedroom, slammed the door, and turned the lock, shoving my dresser against it with a screech of wood on wood. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching my pillow, and dialed 911 again. "There's someone outside my apartment," I sobbed, voice breaking. "They've been calling, texting. They're here now. Please, I need help." "We'll send a patrol car," the dispatcher said, her tone finally softening. "Stay inside. Keep everything locked." I hung up and curled into a ball, straining to hear over my ragged breathing. The fridge hummed faintly. The bedside clock ticked. A rustle of leaves brushed the window pane. That window, its curtains still open. I hadn't closed them. Slowly, I lifted my head, dread pooling in my gut. The glass reflected my terrified face, pale skin, wide eyes, and beyond it, the dark night stretched endlessly, stars winking coldly, trees swaying in the breeze. And there, pressed against the pane, a face, grinning, eyes glinting with unnatural light. I screamed, scrambling backward, tumbling off the bed in a tangle of blankets. The face vanished as I hit the floor, but the image burned into my mind. Too wide a mouth, too sharp a grin. Sobbing, I crawled to the corner as far from the window as the room allowed. A sharp knock on the bedroom door jolted me upright. "Sarah, this is Officer Martinez with the police. Are you all right?" Relief crashed over me like a wave. "Yes, I'm here," I croaked, shoving the dresser aside with arms that felt like jelly. 2 officers stood in the hallway. Martinez, broad-shouldered and stern, and Chen, younger, her flashlight sweeping the shadows. "Are you hurt?" Martinez asked, his voice steady. "No, but there was someone at my window. Right there." I pointed, but the glass showed only my reflection now, the night beyond empty. They searched the apartment, then the building's exterior. No footprints beneath the window, no signs on the fire escape. "It's secure," Chen said, frowning. "No way someone could have climbed up without a ladder or gear." "I'm sure," I insisted, voice rising. "He was there, and the calls, the texts. Look." I thrust my phone at them, but the messages were gone. The call log empty, save for my 911 dials. Deleted somehow. Martinez and Chen exchanged a glance. Skepticism, pity. I couldn't tell. "Miss Carter," Martinez said gently, "is there someone who could stay with you tonight? A friend? Family?" I shook my head, throat tight. "They're all out of state or too far." "We'll have a car patrol the area," Chen offered. "Try to rest. Call if anything else happens." They left, their footsteps fading down the hall. I locked the door behind them, checked every window again, and turned on every light in the apartment. Sleep was a distant dream. I paced instead, jumping at every creak, every car horn outside. Music blared from my stereo, a futile shield against the silence. As the first gray light of dawn seeped through the curtains, exhaustion dulled my edges. Maybe it was over. Stress. A vivid nightmare. Nothing more. I sank onto the couch, daring to hope. Then my phone buzzed. A new text. "Good morning, Sarah. Did you miss me? Don't worry. I'll see you again soon. Sweet dreams." Attached was a photo of me, asleep on the couch, head lolling against the armrest, taken from above, inside my apartment. I dropped the phone like it burned, a scream trapped in my throat. The police had searched everywhere. I'd been awake all night. How? My gaze darted to the TV remote, the Blu-ray player still on, its menu screen looping silently. A sick realization dawned. I hadn't been watching a new episode last night. I'd been watching myself, recorded and replayed. A creak sounded, not from the floor, but from the walls, deliberate and slow, like footsteps on hollow wood. My phone buzzed again. "Ready for the next episode?" The TV flickered, switching to a grainy feed. Me, standing there, staring at it, my face a mask of terror. The camera angle shifted behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Another creak, closer, from the ceiling. Knife in hand, I crept to the hallway closet, a narrow space I'd dismissed as too small for hiding. The door creaked open, revealing a gap in the wall, a crawl space I'd never noticed. Wires snaked through it, a red light blinking, a camera feeding into the walls, into my life. Footsteps thudded above, descending now, heavy and purposeful. I bolted for the front door, but the locks wouldn't turn, jammed tight. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. A whisper, not from the phone, but from the air itself. "You can't leave the show, Sarah." The TV flared to life, showing me at the door, knife trembling in my grip. A shadow loomed behind me on screen, tall, indistinct, closing in. I whirled around. Nothing. The lights dimmed. The air grew icy, and that low chuckle echoed again, from everywhere and nowhere. The screen went black, then scrawled in jagged letters, "See you tonight." The power died, plunging me into darkness. From the crawl space, a scraping sound began. Something moving, something coming down. I backed against the wall, knife raised, eyes darting in the dark. The apartment was no longer mine. It was a stage, and I was the star of a show I couldn't escape. The scraping grew louder, closer, and in the blackness, I saw it. A glint of eyes watching. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 2. The Roadside Shadow. The headlights barely cut through the torrential downpour as I navigated the winding stretch of Blackwood Road. It was well past midnight, and exhaustion weighed on me like a second skin after hours of driving through the storm. My wipers thrashed against the relentless rain, a futile battle against the deluge that blurred the world beyond my windshield. I'd been on the road since dawn, heading back from a business trip that had dragged on too long. Meetings, handshakes, and a cheap motel with a mattress that creaked louder than my joints. All I wanted was my own bed, my own quiet apartment. But the storm had other plans, stretching a 3-hour drive into a grueling odyssey. The radio crackled with static, the signal lost somewhere in the dense woods flanking the highway. I'd given up on finding a station, letting the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the drum of rain fill the silence. My phone sat useless in the passenger seat, its battery drained from a day of navigation and unanswered texts to my sister, who'd been nagging me to check in. "Jake, you're too stubborn," she'd say. Maybe she was right. Stubborn enough to push through this mess instead of pulling over at the last gas station I'd passed an hour ago. That's when I saw him, a lone figure on the roadside, thumb outstretched, drenched to the bone. He stood under the faint glow of a leaning street lamp, its light flickering like a dying heartbeat. Against my better judgment, I slowed down. I'd been stranded once, years ago, on a night not unlike this, and the memory of shivering in the cold while cars sped past gnawed at me. Little did I know this decision would plunge me into a nightmare I couldn't outrun. I pulled over, tires crunching on wet gravel, and leaned across to unlock the passenger door. He jogged toward me, a shadow in the rain, and slid in, bringing with him the sharp scent of soaked wool and something else, musty, earthy, like damp soil after a flood. "Thanks, mate," he said, pushing back his hood. His voice was oddly calm for someone who'd been stranded in this mess, low and smooth, cutting through the storm's roar. "Thought I'd be out here all night?" "No problem," I replied, pulling back onto the road. "Where are you headed?" "Next town over, if that's all right." He settled into the seat, water dripping from his dark jacket onto the upholstery. I glanced at him. Younger than I'd expected, mid-20s maybe, with sharp features and eyes that caught the dashboard's dim glow, reflecting it back like polished glass. Something about him set me on edge, but I chalked it up to fatigue. "I'm Jake," I offered, hoping conversation would keep me alert. "Matt," he said simply, staring straight ahead. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the rain hammering the roof, the wipers' frantic dance, the only rhythm. I kept sneaking glances at him, trying to pin down what felt off. His hands rested in his lap, unnaturally still, fingers long and pale against the dark fabric of his jeans. His breathing was shallow, almost inaudible, as if he were holding it back. "So what brings you out on a night like this?" I asked, breaking the growing tension. He shrugged, a slow roll of his shoulders. "Sometimes you just need to get away, you know?" I nodded, though I didn't really understand. Who hitchhikes in a storm like this? "Yeah, Long drive for me, too. Business trip. Should have gotten a hotel, but I wanted to get home. Matt hummed, a low sound that vibrated in the confined space. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, unblinking. The rain thickened, sheets of water cascading down the windshield, and I leaned forward, squinting to make out the faded yellow lines. Crazy weather, huh? I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. No response. I glanced over, and my heart lurched. The passenger seat was empty. No Matt, no wet jacket, no trace of him. Just a faint puddle on the leather where he'd been sitting. I slammed on the brakes, the car fishtailing on the slick asphalt, tires screeching as I fought to steady it. My breath came in sharp gasps as I twisted around, half expecting him to be crouched in the back seat, grinning like some horror movie cliché. But the car was empty, save for me. What the hell? I muttered, hands trembling on the wheel. Had I imagined him? Sleep deprivation could play tricks, sure, but the seat was wet, the air still heavy with that musty smell. I fumbled for the interior lights, flicking them on, and searched the car, under the seats, in the footwell, even popping the trunk, despite knowing it was impossible for him to have gotten there. Nothing. No footprints on the road outside. No sign he'd jumped out at 50 miles an hour. I sat back, gripping the steering wheel, trying to piece it together. Maybe I dozed off, dreamed the whole thing. But that puddle, that smell, they were real. With shaking hands, I put the car in drive and pressed the gas, desperate to put distance between me and this stretch of road. My mind churned. Ghost stories, hallucinations, a prank gone wrong, but nothing fit. The rain eased slightly, enough for me to see the faint outline of trees whipping past, their branches clawing at the sky. I checked the rear-view mirror obsessively, half expecting Matt's face to appear, those reflective eyes boring into me. The road stayed empty, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like damp clothes. After what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, I saw lights ahead. A gas station, its fluorescent sign a beacon in the dark. I pulled in, the gravel lot crunching under my tires, and sat there, engine idling, debating my next move. Call the cops? They'd think I was drunk or crazy. Drive home and forget it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Finally, I grabbed my dead phone, useless without a charger, and headed inside. The bell jingled as I pushed through the door, making me flinch. The clerk, an older man with a scraggly beard, looked up from a dog-eared magazine. "Nasty night to be out," he remarked, his voice gravelly. "Yeah," I said, forcing a nod. "Pretty bad." I hesitated, then blurted, "Hey, this might sound crazy, but have you seen anyone come through here tonight? A young guy, mid-20s, wet from the rain?" The clerk furrowed his brow, setting the magazine down. "Can't say I have. You're the first in hours. Everything okay?" I swallowed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I picked up a hitchhiker a few miles back on Blackwood Road, and then he just disappeared from inside my moving car. I braced for laughter, for him to call me tired or delusional. Instead, his face paled, his eyes narrowing. "You picked him up on Blackwood?" I nodded, dread pooling in my gut. "Yeah. Why?" He sighed, rubbing his face with calloused hands. "You're not the first, you know. Been happening for years, always on rainy nights, always that stretch. There was an accident about a decade back. A young guy, hitchhiking in a storm. Driver didn't see him till it was too late. Hit him head on. Died instantly, they say. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? Some say he's still out there, he continued, voice low. Doesn't always talk, but he always disappears. Never hurts anyone, just leaves them shaken. I stumbled back, gripping the counter. That's insane. Ghosts aren't real. I talked to him. He was in my car. The clerk nodded, unperturbed. They all say that. Look, son, why don't you sit down? I've got coffee in the back. You look like hell. Numbly, I followed him to a cramped break room where he poured me a cup of bitter black coffee. The warmth grounded me, but my mind raced. What do I do now? I asked, voice trembling. Not much you can do, he shrugged. Get some rest. Put it behind you. He's never come back for anyone, far as I know. I sipped the coffee, scalding my tongue, and stared at the chipped linoleum. Rest sounded impossible. Matt's face, those eyes, were burned into my memory. After a while, I thanked the clerk and returned to my car. The rain had stopped, the full moon peeking through ragged clouds. I steeled myself for the drive home, checking the back seat one last time. My jacket lay there, the one I'd sworn I'd left at home. I laughed, a shaky, borderline hysterical sound, and shook my head. Imagination, that's all. But as I started the engine, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw him, Matt, sitting in the back, eyes glinting, lips curled in a faint smile. I whipped around. Empty. I peeled out of the lot, tires squealing, heart hammering. The road stretched ahead, shadows dancing in the moonlight, and that watch feeling never left. I made it home in record time, hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. The apartment was dark, silent, a sanctuary, or so I thought. I locked the door, flipped on every light, and sank onto the couch, trying to convince myself it was over. Then my phone buzzed. Impossible. It was dead, uncharged, since the trip. I picked it up, screen glowing. Unknown number. A voicemail waited. Dread clawed at me, but I played it. That raspy breathing again, slow and deliberate. I'm still with you, Jake, Matt's voice whispered, calm and close. The message ended. My phone buzzed again. A text. Look behind you. I froze, breath hitching. Slowly, I turned. The room was empty, lights blazing, but the air felt wrong, thick, charged. Another buzz. Nice place. My stomach dropped. How did he know? I checked the windows. Locked, curtains drawn. The phone rang. Stop it! I shouted, answering without thinking. That chuckle again. Can't stop now, Jake. You invited me in. The line went dead. I stumbled to the kitchen, grabbing a knife. Every shadow a threat. A creak came from the hallway. Not the floor, but the walls, like something shifting inside them. My phone buzzed. Check the closet. Against every instinct, I crept to the hall closet, knife raised. The door creaked open, revealing a tangle of coats and a blinking red light. A camera. Wires snaking into the drywall. Footsteps thudded overhead from the ceiling, deliberate and slow. I bolted it for the door, but the locks wouldn't turn. The phone buzzed. You can't leave me, Jake. The lights flickered, dimmed. A shadow moved in the corner of my eye, tall, indistinct, eyes glinting. I spun. Nothing. The footsteps descended closer, scraping now. The TV flared on, static hissing, then cleared to a grainy feed. Me, standing there, knife trembling, staring at the screen. The angle shifted, behind me. A figure loomed on screen, closer with each flicker. I turned again. Empty room. The air grew cold. The chuckle echoed, and my phone buzzed one last time. Welcome home. Darkness swallowed the apartment. The scraping stopped. Silence pressed in, broken only by my ragged breathing. Then, from the walls, a whisper, I'll see you again. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes glinted, watching, waiting. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 3. The Tower's Echo. The moment I answered that call, I knew this night shift at Oakwood Tower would be different. It was 2:17 a.m., the witching hour if you believe in that sort of thing, and the security desk's phone had been silent all night, until now. I'd been slouched in my chair, the hum of the monitors and the faint drip of a leak somewhere in the ceiling, my only company. The building, a 12-story relic of faded corporate ambition, sat on the edge of town, its upper floors mostly vacant, its lower ones leased to a handful of small businesses that cleared out by 6. I liked the solitude, or I had, until that ring shattered it. I stared at the blinking light on the ancient desk phone, its shrill tone cutting through the stillness like a knife. My hand hovered over the receiver, a prickle of unease creeping up my spine. Calls this late were rare, usually a drunk tenant locked out or a janitor reporting a spill. But something about this one felt off, heavy, like the air before a storm. I picked it up, forcing my voice to steady. Oakwood Tower Security, this is Mike. How can I help you? Static crackled through the line, loud and jagged, before a voice broke through, faint, trembling, unmistakably female. Help me, she whispered, her words barely audible over the hiss. I'm trapped. Please, you have to get me out. My gut clenched. Who is this? Where are you? I sat up, scanning the bank of monitors showing empty hallways, the lobby's flickering lights, the parking lot shrouded in fog. I don't know, she said, her voice rising with panic. It's dark, cold. I can't move. There's something here with me. A sob choked her words, followed by a sharp gasp, as if she'd been startled. Ma'am, slow down, I said, grabbing a notepad. Are you in the building? What floor? My eyes darted across the screens. No movement, no sign of anyone. The cameras were old, grainy, but they'd catch a person, wouldn't they? I don't know, she cried. I can hear you, though. Your voice, it's coming through the walls. The static surged, drowning her out for a moment, then cleared. Please hurry, it's getting closer. The line went dead, the dial tone buzzing like a swarm of flies. I dropped the receiver, heart pounding, and replayed her words. Your voice, through the walls. What the hell did that mean? I checked the caller ID. Nothing. Just a blank field. Internal call, maybe. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, clipped my keys to my belt, and headed for the elevators. If someone was trapped in Oakwood, I'd find them. Prank or not, I wasn't about to ignore a plea like that. The elevator groaned as it climbed, its flickering lights casting shadows that danced on the scuffed walls. I started on the top floor, 12, and worked my way down, sweeping each level with my flashlight. Empty offices, locked doors, the occasional hum of a vending machine. No signs of life, no cries for help. The air grew colder the lower I went, a damp chill that seeped into my bones despite my thick uniform jacket. By the time I reached the basement, storage rooms, boilers, a maze of pipes, the silence was suffocating, broken only by that persistent drip echoing somewhere in the dark. Security to base, I muttered into my radio, static answering me. Anyone copy? Nothing. The signal was dead down here, cut off by concrete and steel. I shone my light into a corner, revealing a rusted grate over a ventilation shaft. Could someone be in there? I crouched, straining to listen, but heard only the faint rush of air, and something else, a low murmur, too soft to make out. My radio crackled then, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. A voice, hers, whispered through the static, "I see you, Mike." I froze, breath catching. "Who's this?" I barked into the radio. "How do you know my name?" No response, just silence. Then that drip again, louder now, rhythmic, like our footsteps on wet stone. I swung the flashlight around empty corridors, shadows twisting in the beam. My pulse raced as I backed toward the stairs, unwilling to turn my back on the dark. Back at the desk, I replayed the night in my head, trying to rationalize it. A prank call, maybe. Someone spoofing the system. But that voice, so raw, so desperate. I checked the monitors again, flipping through feeds. Lobby, hallways, stairwells, all clear. Then the basement feed flickered, and for a split second, I saw her, a figure in the corner, pale and blurry, staring up at the camera. My chair screeched as I jolted back, heart hammering. The screen blinked, and she was gone. I grabbed the phone, dialing my supervisor, Rick. It rang twice before he picked up, groggy and irritated. "Mike, it's 3 a.m. What's wrong?" "There's something weird going on," I said, voice shaking. "Got a call from a woman saying she's trapped in the building. I searched everywhere, nothing. Then I saw her on the basement camera, but she's not there now." Rick sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "You sure you're not just tired? Those old cameras glitch all the time." "I'm sure," I snapped. "She knew my name, Rick. Said she could hear me through the walls." A pause then. "Look, I'll check the logs tomorrow. Stay put. Don't do anything stupid. Call the cops if it gets worse." He hung up, leaving me staring at the monitors, doubt creeping in. Tiredness could play tricks. 12-hour shifts did that to you, but I'd heard her, seen her. The phone rang again, shrill and insistent. I hesitated, then answered. "Oakwood Security," I said, bracing myself. "Mike," she whispered, her voice clearer now, laced with fear. "It's watching me. It knows you're looking for me." Static surged, then a sound, a low guttural hum, not human, rising behind her words. "Where are you?" I demanded, pen poised over the notepad. "Give me something, anything." "The walls," she said, frantic. "It's in the walls. With me. I can't." A scream cut her off, sharp and piercing, then silence. I slammed the receiver down, grabbed my gear, and headed back to the basement, adrenaline overriding reason. If she was there, I'd find her, or whatever it was. The basement was colder now, the air thick with dampness and that musty smell of old concrete. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it across the pipes, the storage crates, the ventilation grate. That murmur again, louder, a chorus of whispers overlapping, unintelligible but alive. I pressed my ear to the grate, heart pounding, and caught fragments. "Help! Trapped! Watching!" Her voice faint but unmistakable. I radioed again, voice cracking. "This is Mike, basement level. I hear something in the vents. Requesting backup." Static answered, then a burst of her voice. "It sees you, Mike." The radio fell silent, battery dead, despite being fully charged at shift start. A clatter echoed behind me, metal on concrete. I spun, light catching a pipe wrench, rolling across the floor as if dropped. No one there. "Who's doing this?" I shouted, voice bouncing off the walls. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony now, pressing against my skull. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible. It wasn't part of the security system. I pulled it out. Unknown number. A text. "Look up." I did. Flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Above me, A tangle of old wiring hung from the ceiling, and nestled among it, a blinking red light. A camera, ancient and caked with dust. Its lens trained on me. My stomach dropped. Oakwood didn't have basement cameras. The feeds didn't extend here. I backed away, beam shaking, and tripped over something soft. A scream lodged in my throat as I looked down. A woman's shoe, scuffed and wet, lying in a puddle. The phone buzzed again. "She's with us now." I bolted for the stairs, taking them two at a time, the whispers chasing me, rising into a wail. Back at the desk, I slammed the door, locked it, and sank into the chair, chest heaving. The monitors flickered, all showing the basement now, though I hadn't touched the controls. Her face appeared on every screen, pale and distorted, eyes wide, mouth moving silently. Then the feeds shifted. Me, sitting here, staring back at myself, filmed from above. I looked up. Another camera, hidden in the ceiling tiles, red light blinking. "No," I whispered, scrambling to my feet. The phone rang again, a relentless chorus. I answered, hands shaking. "What do you want?" I yelled. Her voice, calm now, chillingly so. "You're part of it, Mike." "You always were." A chuckle followed. Not hers, deeper, resonant, vibrating through the desk. The line went dead. I tore through the office, ripping cords from the monitors, smashing the phone with a stapler, anything to stop it. But my cell buzzed. You can't break the signal. The lights dimmed, flickered, and the air grew cold, thick with that musty smell. Footsteps echoed. Not from the hall, but from above, slow and deliberate. Descending through the ceiling, I grabbed my flashlight and ran, keys jangling toward the lobby exit. The doors wouldn't budge. Locked from the outside, impossible without a key card. My phone buzzed. "Stay with us." The monitors flared back on, showing me at the doors, a shadow looming behind me on screen. I spun. Empty lobby, but the shadow grew, stretching across the marble floor. The whispers returned, a tide of voices, hers, others, pleading, laughing, accusing. "Mike, help, watch." I backed against the glass, flashlight beam darting, catching glints in the dark, eyes, dozens of them, flickering in and out. The phone buzzed one last time. "Welcome to the tower." Darkness swallowed the lobby. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, broken by a single whisper, not from the phone, but from the air. "We see you." A hand brushed my shoulder, cold, insubstantial, gone when I turned. The lights flared back on, blinding me. The monitors showed static, then black, words scrawling across them. "Shift's not over." I stood there, alone, or not alone, watching the shadows, waiting for the next call. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 4. The Barn in the Storm. The wind howled through the trees like a wounded beast, its voice rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed almost alive. I stood at the edge of my campsite, rain pelting my face, watching as the last remnants of my weekend escape dissolved into chaos. My tent, a flimsy green thing I'd bought on sale, flapped uselessly against the onslaught, its stakes pulling free from the muddy earth one by one. The campfire I'd tended so carefully was nothing but a hiss of steam now, drowned by the deluge that had descended without warning. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in stark, jagged bursts, and thunder followed so close it rattled my bones. I should have checked the weather. I should have packed up when the first gray clouds rolled in that morning, but I hadn't. and now I was paying the price. My name's Ethan Carter, a 32-year-old office drone who'd convinced himself that a solo camping trip would fix the mess my life had become. A breakup with my fiancée, Lauren, had left me hollowed out, and the monotony of my desk job, endless spreadsheets and fluorescent lights, had only deepened the wound. I'd craved solitude, a chance to reset, so I'd driven 3 hours from Portland to this remote stretch of Oregon forest, a place I'd found on a hiking forum promising untouched wilderness. Untouched, sure, but right now it felt more like forsaken. The storm had hit mid-afternoon, turning my peaceful retreat into a soggy nightmare. My gear was soaked, my phone useless with no signal, and the temperature was dropping fast. I needed shelter, and I needed it now. That's when I remembered the barn. I'd seen it the day before, maybe a mile from my campsite, while hiking along an overgrown trail. It had stood alone in a clearing, its weathered planks silvered by time, its roof sagging under the weight of years. It looked abandoned, a relic of some long-forgotten farmstead swallowed by the woods. At the time, I thought it was picturesque, a perfect subject for the photos I'd planned to take. Now, it was my only hope. Grabbing my backpack, stuffed with a flashlight, a half-empty water bottle, and a soggy protein bar, I abandoned the tent and set off through the trees. The rain stung my eyes, and the wind tore at my jacket, but I pressed forward, guided by memory and desperation. Branches clawed at my arms, and the ground sucked at my boots, each step a battle against the mud. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment I saw it, the barn's silhouette against the roiling sky, dark and looming. Relief surged through me, though it was tinged with something else, a flicker of unease I couldn't quite place. By the time I reached the clearing, I was drenched to the bone, shivering uncontrollably. The barn was bigger than I remembered, its walls rising like a monolith against the storm. The double doors hung ajar, creaking faintly as the wind pushed against them. Up close, it looked less quaint and more ominous, its faded red paint peeling into strips, revealing rot beneath. The air around it felt heavy, still, as if the storm's fury stopped at its threshold. Another crack of thunder jolted me forward. Picturesque or not, it was dry, and that was all that mattered. I slipped through the gap in the doors, the darkness inside swallowing me whole. The sound of the rain dulled to a muffled roar, replaced by the drip of water through unseen cracks, and the faint rustle of something small scurrying in the shadows. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a cavernous space cluttered with relics of the past, rusted pitchforks leaning against a wall, a broken plow half buried in hay, a ladder leading to a loft shrouded in cobwebs. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood, mold, and something sharper, almost metallic, that prickled at the back of my throat. I moved deeper inside, my boots crunching on the straw-strewn floor. The barn creaked around me, its timbers groaning under the storm's assault. I found a corner near the back where the roof seemed intact and dropped my backpack, sinking onto a pile of hay that smelled faintly of decay. My hands shook as I pulled off of my soaked jacket, the cold seeping into my bones. I'd wait out the storm here, I told myself. A few hours, maybe less, and then I'd head back to my car at the trailhead. Simple. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so soft it might have been the wind slipping through the cracks. I froze, my flashlight beam darting across the walls. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing in the emptiness. No answer. Just the steady drip of water and the distant howl of the storm. I shook my head, laughing nervously. Get a grip, Ethan. It's just your imagination. But then it came again. Louder this time. A long, slow exhalation that seemed to rise from the floor itself. My heart thudded against my ribs. Is someone there? I asked, standing up, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The beams swept the barn, catching glints of metal and the dull sheen of wet wood, but nothing moved. Nothing human, at least. I sat back down, forcing myself to breathe. It was the storm, I reasoned. Old buildings made noises, creaking boards, shifting beams. I'd heard worse in my apartment during a windy night. I rummaged in my backpack, pulling out the protein bar and tearing it open with my teeth. The taste was stale, but it grounded me, gave me something to focus on, besides the growing sense that I wasn't alone. Night fell fast, the last traces of daylight snuffed out by the storm clouds. The darkness inside the barn thickened, pressing against the weak circle of my flashlight. I kept it on, its beam a lifeline in the void. The noises started then, soft at first, easy to dismiss. A creak from the loft above, a faint scratching along the walls, the shuffle of hay in a corner too far to see. I told myself it was rats, or maybe the wind rattling loose planks, but the explanations felt flimsy, like lies I was desperate to believe. Then came the thud. It was loud, deliberate, a heavy weight dropping onto the loft floor directly above me. I yelped, swinging my flashlight upward. The beam caught the edge of the ladder, the sagging beams, but nothing else. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "This isn't funny?" Silence answered me, thick and suffocating. Then, just as I lowered the light, I saw it. A shadow too large to be a rat, darting out of sight in the loft. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was up there. Or something. I grabbed my backpack, ready to bolt for the doors. Storm be damned, when the whispering started again. This time I could make out words, faint and overlapping, like a chorus of voices speaking just beyond comprehension. "Join us," they seemed to say, the sound curling around me, seeping into my skull. "Stay with us." I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam jerking wildly. "Who's there?" I demanded, louder this time, though my voice trembled. "Show yourself." The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of pleas and murmurs, and then a hand touched my shoulder. I screamed, spinning around and swinging my flashlight like a club. The beam caught a face, pale, gaunt, with eyes that glowed like a cat's in the dark. Its mouth stretched into a grin, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. I didn't think, didn't process. I just ran. My shoulders slammed into the barn doors, the wood groaning as I forced them wider. The rain hit me like a wall, soaking me instantly. But I didn't care. Behind me, I heard movement, rustling hay, creaking boards, the slap of bare feet on wet wood. I crashed into the forest, branches tearing at my skin, mud sucking at my boots. Lightning flashed, and in its brief glare I saw them, shapes moving through the trees, tall and thin, their limbs too long, their heads tilted at impossible angles. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs buckled beneath me. When I finally stopped, collapsing against a tree, the barn was out of sight, lost in the storm's chaos. The rain pounded down, washing away the sweat and blood from a dozen scratches on my arms. I listened, straining to hear over the wind. Nothing. No whispers, no footsteps. Just a storm. I told myself it was over, that I'd escaped whatever madness lived in that barn. But as I caught my breath, a new sound reached me, a faint, rhythmic thudding, like footsteps circling in the distance. I swung my flashlight around, its beam cutting through the rain, but the forest was empty. Or so it seemed. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the storm's relentless grip. I trudged through the woods, picking a direction at random, praying it would lead me back to the trailhead. My flashlight flickered, its battery dying, and I cursed myself for not packing spares. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, but the cold had settled deep into my bones, making every step a slog. I kept replaying what I'd seen in the barn. That face, those eyes, that grin. It couldn't have been real. Exhaustion, dehydration, maybe even some toxic mold in the hay messing with my head. I'd read about that once. Fungi that caused hallucinations. It made sense, didn't it? A rational explanation for an irrational night. But the whispers, I couldn't shake them. They'd felt real, alive, burrowing into my mind like parasites. And those shapes in the trees, what were they? Animals, I told myself. Deer, maybe, startled by my panic. Yet the memory of their two long limbs, their unnatural gait, gnawed at me. A sound snapped me out of my thoughts, a low guttural moan, like the one I'd heard in the barn. It came from behind me, close enough to raise the hairs on my neck. I spun around, flashlight raised, but the beam revealed only dripping branches and shadows. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice raw. "I'm not going back." The moon came again, farther this time, as if retreating. I stood there, panting, waiting for it to return. When it didn't, I forced myself to keep moving. I had to get out of these woods, back to my car, back to civilization where things made sense. The forest began to thin, the trees giving way to a narrow dirt path. Relief flooded me. This had to be the trail I'd taken from the parking lot. I followed it, my pace quickening despite the ache in my legs. The storm was fading now, the clouds parting to reveal a sliver of moon, its pale light filtering through the canopy. I was going to make it. The barn loomed ahead of me. I stopped dead, my breath hitching. It couldn't be. I'd run in the opposite direction, hadn't I? The trail should have led me away, not back. But there it was, its sagging roof and peeling walls, unmistakable, standing in the same clearing I'd fled hours ago. The doors were closed now, the gap I'd squeezed through sealed tight, as if it had never been there. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This isn't possible." A creak sounded from the barn, slow and deliberate, like a hinge protesting. The doors began to swing open, revealing the black void within. My flashlight flickered again, then died, plunging me into near darkness. I fumbled with it, slapping it against my palm, but it refused to revive. The moon's light was all I had now, and it wasn't enough. Something moved inside the barn, a shadow, tall and spindly, stepping into the doorway. It didn't speak, didn't whisper, but I felt its presence, heavy and malevolent, pressing against me, like a physical weight. I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't move. They felt rooted, as if the ground itself had claimed me. "Join us," the whispers returned. Louder now, a chorus rising from the barn, the trees, the earth beneath my feet. "Stay with us." The figure stepped forward, its form resolving in the moonlight. It was human once, maybe, its skin pale and stretched tight over a skeletal frame, its eyes sunken pits that glowed faintly, its mouth a jagged slash of teeth. Tatters of clothing hung from its body, remnants of a life long gone. Behind it, more shapes emerged, a dozen or more, their movements jerky and unnatural, like puppets on broken strings. I screamed, or tried to, my voice caught in my throat, choked by terror. The figures advanced, their whispers swelling into a deafening roar. I clawed at the ground, desperate to break free, and somehow my legs obeyed. I stumbled backward, then turned and ran, the path stretching endlessly before me. The forest blurred past, a nightmare of shadows and snapping branches. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispers chased me, weaving through the trees, tugging at my mind. My chest burned, my vision swam, but I kept going, driven by a primal need to survive. Then a miracle. Headlights in the distance. I burst onto a road, waving my arms like a madman as a pickup truck slowed to a stop. The driver, an older man with a weathered face, leaned out his window. "You okay, son? What the hell happened to you?" I collapsed against the truck, gasping for air. "Please," I managed, "get me out of here." He didn't ask questions, just unlocked the passenger door. I climbed in, my hands shaking so badly I could barely close it. As we pulled away, I risked a glance back. The road was empty, the forest still, but I swore I saw them. Pale faces peering from the trees, their glowing eyes fixed on me. The man dropped me at a gas station in the nearest town, a sleepy place called Millwood. I thanked him, my voice hoarse, and stumbled inside to call a tow truck for my car. The clerk, a bored teenager with acne scars, barely looked up as I explained my situation. I didn't tell him about the barn, the whispers, the things I'd seen. How could I? He'd think I was crazy. And maybe I was. I sat in a plastic chair by the window, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup, waiting for the tow truck. The storm had passed, leaving a clear sky studded with stars. I should have felt safe, relieved, but I didn't. Every creak of the gas station's roof, every rustle of leaves outside, made me flinch. I kept my eyes on the road, half expecting the barn to appear again, its doors yawning open. The tow truck driver was a quiet guy, middle-aged and balding, who didn't press me for details when I asked him to take me to my car. We drove back into the woods, the headlights carving a tunnel through the darkness. When we reached the trailhead, my beat-up Honda sat untouched, its windows fogged with condensation. I paid the driver and watched him leave, the red glow of his tail lights fading into the night. I got in my car, locking the doors immediately. The engine sputtered to life, and I floored it, the tires spinning briefly in the gravel before catching. I didn't stop until I was back in Portland, the city's lights, a beacon of normalcy. My apartment felt alien when I stumbled inside, too bright, too quiet. I locked the door, checked the windows, then collapsed onto my couch, still in my muddy clothes. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it brought dreams of the barn, of endless corridors lined with hay, of whispers that clawed at my soul, of pale hands reaching from the shadows. I woke up screaming, the echo of "Join us" ringing in my ears. Days turned into weeks, but the barn stayed with me. I didn't go camping again. Couldn't even look at my gear without feeling my stomach twist. I threw it all out, tent and all, and told myself I'd stick to city life from now on. Work became my refuge, the monotony a shield against the memories. But the whispers didn't leave. They came at night, faint at first, easy to dismiss as the wind or my neighbor's TV. Then they grew louder, more insistent, slipping into my waking hours. I'd hear them in the hum of my computer, the rustle of papers, the drip of my kitchen faucet. "Stay with us," they'd say, soft and seductive, pulling at something deep inside me. I started researching, digging into the history of that forest. Old newspaper archives mentioned a farmstead that vanished in the 1920s. Family gone, without a trace. Barn left standing. Locals whispered about disappearances over the decades, campers who never returned, but the stories were buried, dismissed as folklore. I found a forum post from a hiker who'd seen shapes near an old barn, his account eerily similar to mine. He'd stopped posting after that. The more I learned, the less I slept. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, all was gone when I turned to look. My reflection in the mirror seemed wrong sometimes. My eyes too bright, my smile too wide. I stopped looking. One night I woke to silence. No traffic, no hum of the fridge. Just a stillness that pressed against my ears. The whispers were back, louder than ever, coming from my living room. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands trembling, and crept toward the sound. The barn stood there, in the middle of my apartment. It was impossible, absurd, but there it was, its weathered planks filling the space where my couch should have been, its doors creaking open. The air grew cold, thick with the smell of damp hay and rot. The whispers poured out, a tidal wave of voices, and I felt them tugging at me, pulling me closer. "Join us," they sang, and this time I saw them. Dozens of figures crowding the doorway, their glowing eyes locked on me. The one from the forest stepped forward, its grin stretching wider, its hand outstretched. "You can't run forever, Ethan." I dropped the knife, my resolve crumbling. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was where I belonged, where I'd always belonged. The breakup, the job, the emptiness, it had all led me here, to this moment. I took a step forward, then another, the barn's darkness swallowing me whole. When my landlord finally broke down my door a month later, worried about unpaid rent, he found an empty apartment. No furniture missing, no signs of a struggle, just me, gone. The police searched, my family grieved, but no one ever found me. They didn't know where to look. Out in the Oregon woods, the barn still stands, its doors closed tight against the world. Sometimes, on stormy nights, hikers swear they hear whispers drifting from within, voices calling out to join them. And if you listen closely, you might hear one that sounds like mine, forever part of the chorus, forever home.